What happens when arrogance meets quiet strength? At a dusty truck stop, a young manager hurls insults at an old man he sees as worthless. But little does he know, this nobody holds the keys to the entire company. Stick around because this story will flip your expectations upside down. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden streaks across the highway as Roger Reynolds, 74, tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His knuckles were thick and calloused, the veins beneath his weathered skin rising like old riverbeds. The engine of his battered Kenworth rumbled beneath him, every vibration a reminder that this truck, much like himself, had seen better days. Roger let out a sigh, the kind that carried not just exhaustion but the quiet ache of a man forced back onto the road. He had once dreamed of retirement, fishing by the lake, afternoons with his late wife's old records, maybe even a quiet garden. But life, as it often does, had pulled the rug from under him. A nephew, the one everyone warned him about, had charmed Roger into a shady investment, and just like that, years of careful saving had vanished. His back ached as he pulled into the fueling station, the sign overhead a familiar one, the very company he had given 3 decades of his life to. Now, instead of a gold watch or a fond farewell, he was just another driver in the long line of forgotten names. Roger eased the truck into the lot, the brakes sighing under the weight of the trailer. He shuffled into the small station office, hoping for a quick refuel and maybe, just maybe, a hot coffee to take the edge off the road. Behind the counter stood Tyler, young, sharp-featured, with a designer haircut that didn't match the dusty world of truckers and diesel fumes. His polo shirt clung to his gym-toned arms, and a smug grin played at the corners of his mouth as he spotted Roger. Well, Tyler drawled, eyes flicking over Roger's faded flannel, the patched-up jeans, the trucker cap with its sun-bleached logo. Didn't know they still let dinosaurs on the road. Roger straightened a little, offering a tight smile. Just need a fill-up, son. Tyler chuckled, leaning on the counter. Sure thing, old-timer. Just don't break a hip walking back to your rig. His buddies at the back of the office snickered, eyes flicking up from their phones. Roger's jaw tightened. He'd faced worse. Breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, icy roads, clients who didn't pay. But something about Tyler's oily arrogance pressed under his skin. Look, Roger said evenly, I'm just here to get some fuel and get back on the road. No need for the mouth. Tyler raised his eyebrows, mock offense flashing across his face. Whoa there, Grandpa. No need to get all grumpy. We're just having some fun. Relax, yeah. Roger turned to walk back outside, willing himself to ignore the laughter behind him. His pride, the kind carved out over years of hard work, smarted, but what choice did he have? He couldn't afford to cause trouble, not now. Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at the edges of his jacket. Roger rubbed his temples, trying to gather himself. The pump clicked loudly as the fuel ran, the only sound in the empty lot. But then, headlights swung across the pavement, and a sleek, polished truck pulled in, smooth as a cat among pigeons. Its chrome gleamed under the fading sun, its body spotless, practically humming with quiet authority. Roger glanced over, his eyes narrowing slightly. That wasn't just any truck. That was the truck, the kind the company reserved for top executives, the rare few who actually knew what was happening beyond their glass offices. The door opened, and a tall figure stepped out. Sharp suit, polished boots, a presence that immediately drew attention without needing to say a word. The man paused, surveying the scene with cool eyes. Roger felt the faintest ripple of curiosity under his fatigue. Whoever this was, he hadn't come here by accident. Back inside, Tyler's voice carried through the glass. Old man probably can't even work the pump. Bet he'll forget where he parked next. More laughter. Roger clenched his fists, heat rising in his chest. He didn't see the suited figure quietly observing from across the lot, arms crossed, gaze flicking from Tyler to Roger and back again, taking it all in. In that moment, something shifted in the air. Roger could feel it, though he couldn't yet name it, like the faint rumble before a coming storm. Inside the cabin of the sleek, polished truck sat Daniel Cole, a name that carried weight in boardrooms across the country, but was unknown to most of the men and women who actually kept coal logistics alive on the road. At 43, Daniel had built an empire, transforming the family company into one of the largest freight and logistics operations in America. His tailored suit jacket hung on the passenger seat, his white shirt rolled neatly at the sleeves, expensive watch glinting softly in the fading light. He watched through the windshield, silent, taking in the scene unfolding just outside. An old driver, tired, humble, but dignified, enduring the petty cruelty of a young station manager. Daniel's sharp blue eyes flicked between the two men, his mind already moving fast. He hadn't expected this when he set out on his journey. For months, Daniel had felt disconnected from his own company. Numbers, reports, shareholder meetings, they told only part of the story. Somewhere along the way, the human side had been lost. On a restless night 2 weeks ago, he had made a decision. Step away from the boardroom, climb behind the wheel, and experience the road himself. No security detail, no assistance, no corporate shine. Just him, a truck, and the real world of the people whose sweat fueled his fortune. Tonight, that decision felt particularly right. Daniel opened the door and stepped down, his polished boots clicking softly on the pavement. He stood for a moment, watching as Roger quietly finished at the pump, the lines of fatigue deepening on his face. Inside the station office, Tyler continued his little performance, snickering to his friends, clearly unaware of the man now crossing the lot. Daniel let the young manager's laughter roll over him. That wasn't his focus, not yet. Instead, he approached Roger with a quiet, almost effortless presence. "Evening," he said, his voice smooth but not arrogant, carrying just a hint of curiosity. Roger, startled, turned. "Evening," he answered cautiously. Daniel offered a small smile. "I saw what happened back there. That was something." Roger let out a rough chuckle, shaking his head. "Ah, it's nothing. Kids these days think they know everything." He waved it off, but Daniel could see the heaviness in the older man's eyes. "Can I buy you a coffee?" Daniel asked, motioning toward the small diner attached to the station. Roger hesitated. He didn't recognize the stranger, but something about the offer, the quiet respect, the lack of pity, made him nod. "Sure," he said. "Could use a cup." Inside the diner, the air was warmer, the hum of an old jukebox blending with the soft clatter of dishes. They slid into a booth, the vinyl seats cracked with age. For a while, they just sat in silence, sipping their coffee. Finally, Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You've been driving long?" Roger gave a wry smile. "Longer than you've probably been alive." He sipped his coffee, then sighed. "Didn't think I'd still be on the road at this age. I was supposed to be retired by now. Fishing, maybe. Sitting on a porch somewhere." Daniel tilted his head, listening intently. Roger ran a hand through his thinning white hair. "My nephew convinced me to invest in some real estate deal. Promised it'd double my savings. Instead, it disappeared, all of it, just like that." He let out a humorless laugh. "So here I am, back behind the wheel. Not much choice." Daniel felt something stir in his chest, a tightening he hadn't expected. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a mirror reflecting things he had ignored for too long. "You still take pride in it," Daniel said quietly. "The work, I mean." Roger nodded slowly. "Yeah, always did. You put in an honest day's work, you keep the world moving. Doesn't matter if no one thanks you. You know what you've done." He gazed out the window, eyes distant. "But sometimes it feels like the world forgot about us." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He looked down at his coffee, the swirling reflection of the diner lights dancing on the surface. In his world of earnings calls, PR teams, and profit margins, people like Roger had become numbers. Retention rates, turnover, fuel costs. But here, face to face, the numbers had a voice. A tired, dignified, stubborn voice that demanded to be heard. "I'm Daniel," he said finally, extending a hand. Roger shook it firmly. "Roger Reynolds." Daniel didn't add coal, not yet. For now, it was enough to sit across from a man who had carried the weight of the company's cargo on his shoulders for decades. A man who had been battered but not broken. In the back of Daniel's mind, gears were already turning. This meeting wasn't random, it was a message. And he was starting to realize just how much work he had ahead of him. The night deepened outside, but inside that little booth, a quiet understanding was forming. One that would change both their paths in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The diner's lights flickered low as the night dragged on. After parting ways with Roger, Daniel slipped quietly back into his truck. But instead of turning in for sleep, he opened his laptop, the screen's glow casting sharp angles across his face. His jaw was clenched, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. The video call connected. On the other end, bleary-eyed but attentive, appeared Megan Huang, the company's head of HR, and Carlos Rivera, operations manager for the Western region. Both had been jarred awake by Daniel's urgent summons. They'd never known their boss to pull rank at this hour, let alone from the middle of nowhere. "Daniel," Megan asked cautiously. "What's going on?" Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "I need you both to listen carefully. Tonight, I witnessed something at one of our company stations. A young manager mocking and disrespecting an older driver. He thought no one important was watching. But I was. And if it's happening here, it's happening elsewhere." Carlos stiffened. "Do you have the manager's name?" "Tyler Mason," Daniel replied crisply. "But this isn't just about one man. I want you to pull records on complaints, manager evaluations, turnover rates, everything from the last 2 years. Focus on field locations, fueling stations, depots. I want to know if there's a pattern." Megan's face sobered. "You think we've been missing something bigger?" "I know we have," Daniel said quietly. "We've been too focused on growth numbers, expansion plans, digital platforms. Meanwhile, the people keeping this company alive, they're being mistreated by small-time tyrants." He sat back for a moment, the weight of realization settling over him. "We fixed this now. No more delays, no more excuses." By 3 a.m., reports were pouring into Daniel's inbox. Complaints from drivers about local managers dismissing concerns, cutting corners on safety, ignoring overtime requests. Instances of older workers being pushed aside or ridiculed. Letters from loyal employees who had left quietly, hearts broken and dignity bruised. Daniel read every word, and with each line his resolve hardened. Meanwhile, outside in the lot, Roger lay curled up in the back of his old truck. He snored softly, a thin blanket pulled up over his chest, the hum of distant engines and the cool night air his only company. For him, tomorrow was just another day, another long haul, another set of miles. He had no idea the storm that was gathering behind the glass windows of the station. As the sun rose, the gas station stirred to life. Tyler Mason strutted into the building, coffee in hand, sunglasses perched cockily on his head. He smirked at the sight of Roger's old truck still parked outside. "Geez," he muttered to the clerk. "Some people just don't know when to quit, huh?" But his swagger froze as soon as he rounded the corner. Standing at the counter, arms folded, was Rachel Kim, the regional director. A woman Tyler had only met once at a corporate retreat, and whose presence here made no sense. Standing beside her was someone even more jarring. The tall, sharply dressed man he had dismissed last night as just another driver. Daniel Cole. Tyler's face drained of color. He stumbled forward, mouth half open. "Mr. Cole? I didn't realize." Daniel raised a hand, silencing him. His expression was cool, calm, but his eyes were cutting steel. "Tyler Mason," he said evenly, "we need to talk." The confrontation was swift and public. Rachel listed the compiled complaints from employees and customers alike, reading them aloud as a small crowd of station workers and drivers gathered. Tyler tried to laugh it off, then to protest, but every word only dug him deeper. "I trusted you with one of my company's frontline stations," Daniel said quietly, stepping forward. "Instead of leadership, you chose arrogance. Instead of service, you chose humiliation. That ends today." Tyler's shoulders slumped, his bluster collapsing like a punctured balloon. By the time Daniel was done, Tyler was escorted to the back office, his employment terminated on the spot. The station staff watched in stunned silence, murmurs rippling among them. None had expected this. The boss himself, descending from the heights of the corporate tower to walk among them and clean house. But Daniel wasn't finished. He turned to Rachel, voice lower now. I want Roger Reynolds' file on my desk by tomorrow. Seniority records, service awards, everything. And I want you to set up a meeting with the board. I've got a proposal that's going to shake things up. Rachel's eyebrows lifted slightly, intrigued but cautious. Understood, sir. Outside, Roger rubbed his eyes and stretched, yawning as he stepped out of his truck. He was startled to see the small gathering near the station entrance, the sight of Tyler being led away, the expensive car parked near the office. He didn't know yet that his quiet endurance, his humble pride, had just set into motion something far larger than a local firing. Daniel watched him from a distance, a thoughtful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Roger might think he was just another old driver struggling through one more rough year, but Daniel saw something else. A living symbol of the company's soul, the part he had been blind to for too long. As the sun climbed higher and the trucks began to roll out for the day, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Roger's journey wasn't over, and neither was his own. Together, they were about to chart a new course, one that would ripple through every mile of coal logistics. Roger Reynolds sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring down at the letter in his hands. He rubbed the crease thoughtfully, the callous tips of his fingers tracing over the coal logistics letterhead. Mentor coordinator position, it read. Not a promotion in the usual sense. No fancy office, no big city relocation, but an invitation to step off the long highway he'd ridden for decades and into something new. Daniel Cole himself had delivered the offer, meeting Roger outside the diner 2 days ago. They'd shared another coffee, this time with no pretense, no hidden identities. Daniel had spoken openly about the need for change, not just in policies or management, but in culture. I need people like you, Roger, Daniel had said quietly. Not just driving, but teaching, inspiring. At first, Roger had laughed. The idea of standing in front of younger drivers, offering advice like some polished executive, felt ridiculous. I'm no poster boy, Daniel, he'd said. I'm just a guy who knows how to get from A to B. But Daniel had leaned forward, eyes sharp but kind. And that's exactly why they'll listen to you. Now, alone in the room, Roger felt the weight of the decision. To leave behind the cab he'd called home, the road that had shaped him, was no small thing. But somewhere deep inside, a spark had been lit, a sense that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't finished yet. The next weeks unfolded like a dream. Roger was introduced at the company's headquarters. His name and face featured not in glossy ads or flashy promos, but in authentic stories shared across the company's internal network. Videos showed him walking the yards, sitting with young drivers in break rooms, talking honestly about the road. The dangers, the loneliness, the pride, the small triumphs that outsiders never understood. At first, Roger was stiff on camera, his words clipped and cautious. But gradually, his natural charm broke through. A dry humor, a quiet sincerity that didn't need polish or scripts. Drivers began to approach him, asking for advice, sharing their struggles. Some were just starting out. Others had already faced burnout and disillusionment. Roger listened to them all, offering steady, unvarnished wisdom. Daniel watched this transformation closely. He made sure the new mentorship program wasn't treated as corporate fluff. Roger wasn't there to smile for photo ops. He was helping reshape hiring, training, even safety protocols. Soon, Roger's influence rippled outward. Local managers began adopting his no-nonsense approach. Respect the drivers, listen to their feedback, reward loyalty, and don't let numbers blind you to the human side of the business. Dispatchers, supervisors, and even executive staff attended workshops Roger helped design. He stood quietly at the back of the room most times, only stepping forward when he had something worth saying. And when he spoke, people listened. Meanwhile, Tyler Mason's fall was sharp and public. Removed from his managerial role, Tyler was given the option to stay on as a regular worker, driving routes, loading shipments, reporting to people he used to command. First, his ego rebelled. He threatened to quit, to sue, to take his talents elsewhere. But Daniel made it clear, redemption was earned, not handed. Reluctantly, Tyler accepted, and slowly, painfully, he began to learn humility. Long hours on the road stripped away his arrogance, forcing him to confront the reality of the job he had once dismissed as easy. He crossed paths with Roger only once in those early months. A brief, quiet exchange at a loading dock, where Roger simply nodded and said, "Everyone gets a chance to rebuild." The company's public image transformed. Cole Logistics launched a new campaign, not polished commercials but real stories from real drivers. Roger's weathered face became the centerpiece, but he insisted that the spotlight be shared. Beside him were women breaking into the industry, veterans starting second careers, young people finding purpose behind the wheel. Roger stood awkwardly in photos at first, wearing his old cap and worn jacket, refusing the fancy suits PR had suggested. But over time, he found his rhythm. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. He was showing the world what he had always been: a survivor, a teacher, a quiet giant. In the final weeks of the program's launch, Roger visited the station where it had all started. The gas pumps, the diner, the loading bays, they were the same, but something had shifted. Drivers nodded to him with respect. Staff who had once ignored the truckers now greeted them by name. Roger leaned against his old truck, the sun setting behind him, and smiled softly. He had once thought his life was shrinking, winding down into smaller and smaller circles. But now, he saw that his story had expanded, touching people he'd never met, changing a company he'd once felt invisible within. He wasn't just driving trucks anymore. He was driving a legacy. And sometimes Roger realized the biggest engines weren't the ones under the hood. They were the ones inside the hearts of ordinary people who kept going mile after mile, year after year, without asking for applause. Now, finally, the world was paying attention. This story reminds us that true power often hides in plain sight, and real strength is measured not by titles, but by character. What would you have done if you were Roger or even Daniel? Tell us in the comments. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that inspire and surprise.